but I'm just going to say a few things at the beginning to explain, and Emily might chip in, David might chip in as well, and if Janet Fenton, our Vice Chair, joins us, she will possibly also chip in. But hopefully you'll get a chance, if you're wishing to ask things, to do so. Okay, so the reasons why this is important are multiple. And the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, of course, has just given us a further additional reason that we could have well done without. But let me just start with the fact that our priority, of course, is nuclear disarmament. But nuclear disarmament in Scotland and the world. And one of the reasons why this election, of course, is incredibly important is that should Scotland return parties that are committed to nuclear disarmament, then that might result in a kind of pressure that would lead to the UK having to disarm. And particularly, of course, if Scotland then had an independence referendum and became an independent country, if Trident nuclear weapons system had to be disarmed, it would have literally nowhere else to go. And that would be one route to nuclear disarmament in the United Kingdom. And it would have a knock-on effect, of course, for the whole world. But we're not a party political organisation, and we never have been, and we probably never will be. So we are not advocating voting for any particular political party. What we're advocating and asking people to do and campaign around is candidates who are committed to nuclear disarmament. And it's really important to understand that and to understand that difference. So although the parties of the moment in Scotland who are explicitly committed in their manifestos and in their public platforms to nuclear disarmament are the Scottish National Party and the Greens and the Scottish Socialists. We have an official UK Labour Party that is talking about Trident being non-negotiable, which is an unbelievably stupid position that other people will probably say something about. But the Scottish Labour Party is in a somewhat strange position because at their last conference they took a much better position than that. So we're not advocating any specific party in any straightforward way, but we're asking you to get your supporters to only sort of vote for, to get your friends, family, the people that you engage in your campaigning, to see why it's important to vote for candidates who are committed to nuclear disarmament. And that's what our election strategy and materials are built around. So the background of the nuclear ban treaty entering into force, so in January this year, we have a United Nations treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And the majority world, in the sense of the majority of countries in the world, albeit all of them non-nuclear, have signed up in one way or another to that treaty. And the fact that no nuclear state has signed it, and indeed NATO states have not engaged with it. Well, some have engaged with it, but they haven't become official signatories. That's part of the backdrop, the tide turning very clearly at an international level against nuclear weapons. And in the immediate context as well, the UK happens to be hosting COP26 this year, and so will be very on the international stage. We're on the build-up to that event, but we're also on the build-up to a nuclear non-proliferation treaty review conference, and saying Trident is non-negotiable and increase saying you're explicitly raising the number of nuclear weapons, I suggest are both of these are outrageous in terms of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. So that treaty being reviewed this year is also a very important part of the current backdrop that we need to take into account when we're trying to speak to people and explain these issues. And the way that the UN Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons has gathered momentum has been by emphasizing the inhumanitarian absurdity of nuclear weapons, the absolute nonsense of causing mass death and incredible suffering and despoiling and contaminating generations, not just the immediate present, and indeed causing the potential end of the world itself. All of that is what is seen as insane and is, of course, unequivocally insane. So that is why the doomsday clock is still so close to midnight. So all of that context, we somehow have to very clearly communicate, and we've been trying to develop strategies and materials that will help you do that. So just to remind you what Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty says, the wording is here, and it's the weasel words of politicians try to claim that modernizing and building more nuclear bombs somehow is consistent with pursuing negotiations in good faith on effective measures that are about the cessation of the nuclear arms race. But you can see how clearly it's possible to argue against that. So I think it's worth having a very sort of good grasp of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the possibility of how that would dovetail very nicely with a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And so politicians who are committed to nuclear weapons, who are still talking the old logic of deterrence, try to argue that somehow these two are sort of in conflict, but that's absolute absurdity. There is absolutely no reason why they shouldn't dovetail very nicely together. And so being able to argue back to that maybe is quite important, and being able to explain why that isn't a contradiction is perhaps quite important. So that's all part of the backdrop of why this election in Scotland is, in Scotland, we've just got this moment where we are going to be later in the year front stage anyway through COP26. We have this potential for putting a particular sort of pressure on the UK government if we have a very decisive election, where the nuclear issue is seen as something that makes people vote one way or another and vote in our favour. And although we know that is the case in Scotland, there's many UK politicians who still don't believe it, including Scottish based people who have spent most of their time down south and thinking UK politics and not grasping what's going on in Scotland. And we've got to kind of try to show that this really is an issue that the public do care about, by helping to make it an issue that the public do care about. I mean, we are miles ahead in some senses, but we also know we've still got a lot of work to do. So now really is a time to try to do what we can. And now my clicker has stuck, which it does sometimes, and I don't always understand. There we go. So, so what we've got is a set of materials. We are going to try to work collaboratively as much as possible across the peace movement. So with the ICANN partners, which include Trident Ploughshares, Peace and Justice Centre, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Don't Bank on the Bomb, and also we're going to work with the Campaign Against the Arms Trade as much as possible, try and make as much as possible a coalition of peace movement, but obviously our red line is about nuclear weapons, and nuclear weapons are my red line is the kind of general bottom, that's the bottom line we're trying to emphasize. So although we're a single issue campaign and nuclear weapons is our red line, we also see the value in working collaboratively with other organizations that have got a bigger anti-militarism agenda. So one of the things that we want to do is to have a national hustings, and we've already set a date and started to invited the political parties. So that's an opportunity. We're calling it a peace hustings. That'll be an opportunity to strut our stuff, make demands of the politicians as best we can. We want to try to provide support to campaigners who are out there on the street as much as possible. On the street now, probably meaning on Zoom, who knows what it's going to actually mean. It will mean a lot of online stuff, as well as maybe some limited street stuff once we get a little bit more easing. There's not going to be very much normal electioning. So the hustings that we're hosting, of course, are online, but we will have weekly drop-ins online for campaigners, and this set of briefing materials that are being showcased a bit on this slide here, posters and flyers that you can print, and hopefully support with putting on local events. So there'll be a crib sheet about questions you can ask candidates. So we would like to encourage people to actively do that. We want the candidates to really know that we're looking at them, that we care about this, that we are asking them, if they are elected, will they sign up to the parliamentarian pledge that commits to the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons? Will they commit to that? Will they commit to disarming nuclear weapons in Scotland as quickly as possible? And we'll have resources that you can put up in your own, wherever you manage to do that, and that you can share on social media. And we'll ask you to feed back what you know about candidates' views. So if you're managing to have dialogues, to let everybody else know about them, to use us as a kind of hub to gather and feed material back out again. And if you're successful in getting stuff in your local media, you know, we can maybe help with copy and help you with that, but also you can feed back and enrich our resources and tell us how you get on. So we do want it to be a dialogue. So we're going to launch this manifesto for peace this Friday, and it'll have really, we hope it'll be a very clear message. The 26th of April is the date that we've got for our peace hustings, and we're asking people to follow us on social media and on our website for more information. And this hashtag, nukes are my red line, is a hashtag that we hope to keep using throughout the campaign. So encouraging people to join Scottish CND by going through the website, encouraging people to write to their MPs and MSPs using They Work For You, knowing the nuclear ban treaty, the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons as well as you can. You will know that some local councils are already signed up to a cities appeal, which is the city committing itself to the treaty for basically like a nuclear-free cities, but also committing to the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And we're encouraging people to do online protests of varying sorts. So the website Ban the Bomb is going to carry lots more. It's already got materials up there. You'll find us also on Instagram and on Facebook, and obviously you can email us as well. But the Nuclear Ban Scot website is also a very good source, especially for materials that connect through to ICANN, where there is also a set of very good briefing materials, excellent briefing materials. So that's it for me. It's time to get questions and feedback and further discussions and contributions from other people.
And may I chip in a second?
Yes, of course.
I think your clicker stuck at the most unfortunate moment possible because it skipped you over the slide that set out the 3 demands that we want to ask of every candidate at election. So it might be worth just popping back to that.
There you go. Sorry, that's terrible. There you go. Oops. Can you see? No, you can't see that. Wait, I've just done something stupid. What have I done?
No, we can see that all right.
Is that it? Can you see that? Can you see that okay?
Yep, that's clear.
Right, good. So I don't know, are there already some hands up and some questions in chat? Sorry, I'm lost.
So Janet has put a few comments in the chat, and maybe she'd want to speak to them.
Janet, can you just come in and chip in, please?
Okay, hello. Yes, I just noticed that somebody had said about the SNP and the 2 votes, and that's obviously one consideration, but really it's important that, as far as I'm concerned, we don't need to be party political. As far as nukes are my red line, and I really believe that what we can do is return a Scottish government that can make that a reality. Personally, I support independence, but that's not our ask. Our ask is that we commit to disarming the UK's nuclear arsenal by the most direct route possible. A lot of us think that that includes independence, but if you don't, I'm sure you've got another idea about how it could be delivered. But what you definitely don't want to do is vote for anyone that is not going to make that their absolute priority. I mean, you've seen what Keir Starmer has said, or maybe you've not, but he is absolutely supportive of the government, the UK government, in their nuclear strategy. So if the Labour Party want to get votes in Scotland, they're going to have to take a different approach, because that's one of the key things that we need. We need to make sure that any elected person in our Scottish Parliament is committed to disarming the UK's nuclear arsenal. We're also asking for them to be committed very specifically to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and that is a really huge part of not just getting rid of Trident and the present system, but of getting rid of nuclear weapons globally and getting support from the global community. So getting them to sign the pledge, that's a very specific ask. If they'll do that, and then you can consider the other bits that are important to you, apart from nuclear weapons. But let's just really absolutely stick to these three key commitments that we're asking from anybody that's going to be elected. If they say yes to all of that, then you can consider them. And if they'd say no to all of that, I think you should be looking for somewhere else to put your vote. So I think that if there's any of these three things that you're not absolutely crystal clear about how that works, please get in touch and have a look at the resources that are there and tell us what arguments you need so that we can provide you with the right resources. The other thing that I just wanted to say very quickly was, we don't have long, and it's a very particular and important time. And let's not worry too much about the people that disagree with us. If they're pro-nuclear weapons, we don't need to have that argument. There are enough people in Scotland that support nuclear disarmament. We can just make sure that we only elect politicians that are on our side, and then we will achieve this.
Thanks, Janet. David, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, just following up a little on what Janet said, I would also, as well as parties, there are individual candidates. And I think we want to be incredibly supportive of individual candidates who may be standing against a party line, because we know that's happened in the past and they've made a huge contribution at cross-party level. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.